Hi, it's Zeke with the Eastside Church of Christ in Baytown, Texas. Thanks for joining us for our Eastside Bible reading for the week of May 17th through the 23rd, 2020. We're moving along in David's life in 2 Samuel, and as we move along, we see just how serious God is about his regulations, especially concerning the sacred ark when an attempt is made to move it. Uzzah, a fellow who was a member apparently of the household where the ark had been kept, lost his life in that attempt. Now later on, the ark was moved, more according to God's instructions in the law, and David built a tent for it in Jerusalem. And as it begins to enter the city, David is described as dancing with all his might in celebration before Yahweh. But take note when you read that of his wife Michal's reaction. It wasn't good. Don't forget that Michal, David's wife, was Saul's daughter, Saul the previous king. And it tells us something about their marriage that isn't good and apparently doesn't get any better. Afterward, we find David making an extraordinary kind gesture towards Mephibosheth, who was Saul's grandson. And it tells us that he does this kindness towards Mephibosheth on account of Jonathan, Saul's son. Remember, Jonathan and David were very close friends. And the reason this is so extraordinary is because it was the custom of kings back then to eliminate or exterminate all the lineage of any prior king so that there wouldn't be any rival claims to the throne. And Mephibosheth, as Saul's grandson, could have made a rival claim to David's throne. And that's one of the things that makes this gesture of kindness towards Mephibosheth so extraordinary. And then, in a memorable but very sad event, David has an adulterous affair with Bathsheba, the wife of another man. His name is Uriah the Hittite. Uriah is described in the book of Chronicles as one of David's 30 mighty men, a fierce warrior, somebody who is completely devoted to David and the cause of Israel. Well, in order to cover up this affair, David launches into a series of events that end up with the death of Uriah. And when Nathan the prophet confronts David about this, David, to his credit, recognizes his sin. He repents of it, but that event set in motion a whole series of catastrophes, not only to David himself, but also his family and the kingdom of Israel. As we continue reading in the New Testament, in Acts, we find Paul making his defense before the Jewish Sanhedrin Council that eventually ends up erupting into a near riot. But towards the end of that event, it tells us that Jesus appeared to Paul and told him that Paul must be his witness at Rome. Well, after that, Paul is moved to Caesarea, where he makes his defense before a Roman governor named Felix. And during that time, Paul has the opportunity to speak privately with Felix, and when he does, he speaks right to Felix's heart. He tells him about sin and about coming judgment, and it unnerves Felix somewhat, but apparently not enough for him to make any changes. He leaves Paul imprisoned for 2 years, and eventually Paul has the opportunity to make his defense yet again before another Roman governor. This time his name is Festus, and the regional king Herod Agrippa II. Now this King Herod Agrippa was the grandson of King Herod the Great, who was the king who had tried to exterminate all the babies during Jesus' early infancy. Well, Paul makes his appeal to Rome, in spite of the fact that nobody could ascertain any charges, any credible charges, to fix on him. But he made his appeal to Rome, and Acts chapter 27 tells us about this harrowing and hazardous winter sea journey towards Rome that finally ends up in a shipwreck on a little island called Malta near Sicily. But the episode illustrates for us Paul's exemplary faith in Jesus. After all, if Jesus said that Paul would witness in Rome, then Paul expected that he would get there intact. The Psalms in our reading this week all have something to do with David. Psalm 32 expresses anguish over unrepented sin and the blessedness of forgiveness when it's acknowledged and turned from. While Psalm 51 is David's great confession of his sin with Bathsheba. Psalm 60 laments a defeat in battle. In fact, the battle is recorded for us in our reading this week in 2 Samuel chapter 8. Psalm 89 and Psalm 132 extol God's character in his covenant and unbreakable promise to David. I hope you're enjoying our Bible reading. I hope you'll be with us next time for another summary of our Eastside Bible reading. Thanks for joining us. God bless you.